everyone, this is going to be a quick video talking about the amount of Mikugi that historic swords had, as well as some other things about Mikugi. For those of you who don't know, Mikugi are the pins that go through the handle and help to retain the blade in the ska, which is the handle. On this sword you can see there's one Mikugi right there, and the other one's right there. This one has two. Modern swords often have two Mikugi. Some historic swords had it as well, but one Mikugi was far more common than two. Now, people oftentimes have a hard time believing that one Mikugi is sufficient enough for a fighting blade. Well, what they don't realize is the fact that this pin is not the only thing that keeps this blade from becoming a projectile. That is not the case. At least not on a properly fit ska. On a properly fit ska, the ska is actually fitted to the tang, which you can't see, but it's under the handle. It's custom fit to that, and when you are actually putting the sword together, it doesn't just drop on. It oftentimes takes putting the tang in, and then you have to tap it on with your hand like this. If a ska wants to just fall off, that needs to be addressed because that is not safe. So, this grip relies on friction fit. A properly carved ska theoretically could be used without any pins in it at all. It's not safe. Don't ever do that. Ever, ever, ever. You don't do that. But, hypothetically, it could work. The pin is just there to prevent, if anything failed. So all that force is not going on that pin. That is not what's going on, at least not on a properly fitted ska. That's not the case. If that was the case, though, say it's a sword that has been used a lot, then there's a very specific reason why they chose bamboo on Mikugi instead of other things. For example, wood. Wood was not used for a Mikugi, and it shouldn't be used. Reason being is because of this. First off, this bamboo, on a proper Mikugi, it is not like people talk about using chopsticks. Don't use a chopstick. A chopstick is not the right type of bamboo. First off, it has to have a very tight grain. Even after that, though, it's smoked. So what that does is it basically takes out all the moisture from the Mikugi. And you can tell one that's been smoked because it's a dark brown color. If it is, for example, this color, that's not the right type of bamboo. Obviously, it's better than nothing, but that's not the right type of bamboo, and I will be eventually fixing that on the sword. The reason why it was smoked is because bamboo, much like bone, gets really hard when it's dry. When it's not completely dry, it's still plenty strong, but it is not as strong as a properly smoked pin. The reason why they chose bamboo is because of the actual grain of bamboo. Bamboo does not have grain that goes at an angle like wood can. Oftentimes on wood, you will see the grain going, various different ways. You don't want that for a Mikugi. Very bad. On bamboo, it grows this way, on the pin. Obviously, the bamboo grows this way, and the pin is made out of a section that is facing that way. So on this pin, it's going this way. It is not going this way, because if it was going this way, it'd be way more likely to crack. The good thing about that is, first off, it makes this very strong. The likelihood of this actually breaking, it's not very likely. But even if it were to break, more than likely, because of the way that the grain runs and the fibers, the blade will not generally become a projectile. So, pretty much it's a fail-safe for your fail-safe with the way they designed it. If this were to split, it's way more likely for it to split this way. Again, if it were to split, that is going to definitely help this from becoming a projectile than, wood, for example. The other thing that should be said is, and a lot of sword manufacturers do not get this right, the Makugi is tapered, meaning it goes in one way, it comes out one way. You cannot pound this Makugi out that way. It won't come out. And the same with this one. This one cannot come out that way. The reason why they did that is because this Makugi goes out that way. Well, when you're gripping the sword, your hand covers it. So even if it wanted to come out, it can't because your hand is there. So, it's a very well thought out way to put a sword together, really. Now, on a lot of mass-produced swords these days, unfortunately they get that wrong. They have that Makugi going out that way. Meaning, if you're grabbing it, that could just slip right past your fingers. Not a good thing. But what is good is, generally speaking, they will get the other one in the right place. So when you're holding it with two hands, it's not as bad. Now, on this particular sword, even if this one did come out that way, with the place that one is, it wouldn't help a whole lot because my hands don't go there. If it were all the way down here, then obviously that would help. But the top Makugi is the right way and they are both properly fitted, so I'm not worried about that. There was a case in the 80s of a young man that actually got killed at an EI demonstration in Japan. What happened was the practitioner didn't check his sword. This is why you should always check your sword. His Makugi slipped out. I guess it already had a loose fit with the ska after a lot of use, and the blade became a projectile and actually killed the kid. Stabbed him. He was dead right there. The guy actually right there offered to commit seppuku, but the family said no, there was enough bloodshed for the day. But either way, the whole event could have not happened had the guy just checked his sword, been responsible, checked his equipment. He didn't do that, and because of his negligence, someone got killed. That's why it is a lot of swords these days have two Makugi, was because of that incident. If one were to slip out, that's fine. You still have a second one. Again, not ideal, but the second one will definitely retain that blade. From there, after two, more often than not, it doesn't really help a lot. Some people put 3 or more Makugi in a sword. You really don't need that. Not really necessary. I personally did it on one sword one time, but the reason why I did it was because the second Makugi was actually drilled halfway off the tang. So as a result, I did not completely trust that Makugi pin, so I put another one above it. So the bad one was here, I put another one right there. So basically, the bottom one was just there to fill the hole, basically. Now, many of you still might be a little bit iffy about bamboo. Keep in mind, in feudal Japan, they oftentimes made armor out of bamboo because of the fact that once it dried, it's really hard and really tough. So, for a Makugi, it's just fine. There are other materials that have been used and that I've used myself. One commonly used material nowadays in modern materials is what's called Delrin. Delrin is a very high-strength plastic. From what I've seen, it is definitely sufficient on a sword. One nice thing about Delrin is it is not subject to the conditions, swelling, shrinking, that kind of thing, because it is a polymer. You don't have to worry about that. Bamboo, on the other hand, that swelling can be something to take into account. I once fit a Makugi to a sword, and it was a good fit, and not long later that thing was stuck. And the reason why it was so stuck was because the atmosphere changed, it swelled, and that thing was in there. That's a good thing in a way because you know that it's not going to just fall out. But keep in mind, it can also constrict, and then you have that to account for. So you have to account for the swelling and shrinking of the wood of the ska, plus the swelling and shrinking of the pins. When you have a polymer pin, however, you don't have to worry about that. Another one that is sometimes used is copper, brass, sometimes steel, all these types of materials. And a lot of people scoff at the idea of using metal. What I will say is this. If you're going to use metal, use it on the second Makugi, so the bottom one. Don't use it on the top. The top one you want to be bamboo because it can flex a little bit. The bottom one, that one's okay to have as metal. And there is actually a couple sword styles that, from what I've understood, they actually require the practitioners to have copper, brass, steel, or iron as their bottom Makugi. Generally speaking, from what I've understood of those systems, if you have two, they're okay with copper or brass on the bottom one. If the sword only has one, then they want steel or iron for that one. The thing about using metal, though, is you definitely have to know what you are doing, because that has to be properly fitted to that hole. Bamboo, it's a little more forgiving because it will, to an extent, you can pound it in just a little bit harder and it'll sometimes take the shape a little bit better. Metal, not so much. Not going to happen. Also, there was horn which was used. Horn is, according to some, it's more decorative. Some people say that it is good for use. I would say horn more than likely will be better than wood in a lot of circumstances. However, I will also say that many consider horn to be more decorative, so I wouldn't recommend that. If you want the look of horn, use Delrin. That's what I do. So that's pretty much it. That is what I have to say about Makugi. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I'll see you next video. See ya.